Well, good morning and welcome to another week on my allotment. And as promised, it's 2 weeks since I posted the last video, and things have definitely slowed down on the allotment. I'm sure if you've got an allotment or a kitchen garden, you know that. But of course, that doesn't stop me continuing to prepare for next year. And I'm in the middle of raising another bed. And if you follow me, you know what that means. It means digging the soil out, putting manure, well-rotted manure down in, raking the soil back over, and that brings the bed up by a good 3, 4, maybe 5 inches. And I've got a couple more to do. It's a very hard, labour-intensive process. I don't enjoy doing it, but I do enjoy the results. So I pace it, I take my time. And it's reaping rewards, and that brings me nicely to and I've mentioned it many times, I know, and I apologise for that, but it is of absolutely significance, of importance to me, is just how dry this plot is. Just walked over from my van. It's Sunday morning. It's nearly 10 to 8, and as soon as I get on my plot, the ground is firm and dry underneath. But coming across here is an absolute nightmare. It's an absolute quagmire. So it's definitely worked. The combination of draining my neighbour's plot through that culvert under the path, the Hanley canal, as I laughingly call it, that flows around, that takes the water off the hill, raising the beds and raising the paths with chippings, is all combined to make my plot a dry place. So I thought we'd start this video with a look back and reminder of what it was like this time 12 months ago. Well, I'm sure you'll agree, it's made a hell of a difference, so I'm very pleased with it. I thought once now we've had a look around the plot and last year's state, I'd start with a couple of funny little stories that I've picked up along the way, and I'm just recounting them from a couple of them are from Alan Carr on the Graham Norton show, and one of them is from Sean Penn, the actor. Again, I think that was on the Graham Norton show. And there's just a couple of funny little stories that I thought I'd recount because they're quite interesting. And the first one was Alan Carr told the story of, and you can see these on YouTube if you want. He told the story of a female friend he had that went to stay in South Africa for a holiday. And while she was there, she thought she'd go and get a head massage. So she went to this, I don't know what you call them, clinic? I don't know, place where you get a head massage. And she went into the booth, and there's the woman there, and she said, would you please take your knickers off, please? And this friend of Alan Carr's thought, take my knickers off for a head massage. That's a bit odd. But anyway, she thought, South Africa will do what they do. So she took her knickers off and sat on the couch thing, and this lady came back in and she said, no, your necklace. It's all in the accent. Ooh, the kettle's boiling. Oh, the day has truly begun. Yes, and the other one he told us, it's all about foreign travel with Alan Carr. He was staying in Auckland, and apparently the BBC put all the people up in the same hotel in Auckland. And what he didn't realise when he went to stay in the hotel was that right next to the hotel is a bungee jumping attraction. And he said he got settled in his room, and the next thing he knew, there was a person screaming past his window on the way down. And he looked, Jesus, what on earth? You know, and then 2 or 3 minutes later, another person dies past, and he thinks, how bad is this hotel if people keep committing suicide? He didn't realise they were bungee jumping. You would have thought that they'd come back up, wouldn't you? And he'd get the gist. But anyway, I thought that was quite funny. And the other one was Sean Penn, which as a father of a daughter, I can really relate to and find quite hilarious. And I wish I'd thought of it when my daughter was of the age where she was going out, you know, in the first few tentative steps of courting, which is what us old-fashioned folk call boys and girls going out together. Anyway, they had the, what do you call it, the prom night, which is a big deal in America. And Sean Penn has a daughter, and she was going to this prom with a young man, and it was her first sort of formal date. And it was a big deal for the young lady. And Sean Penn, if you don't know him, he's quite an intimidating-looking man. And quite a grumpy old man, which again I can relate to. Anyway, this young gentleman turns up looking very smart and comes in the house and introduces himself to Sean Penn, which, you know, must take a certain amount of courage. And Sean Penn sat him down, as all fathers do when somebody's taking their daughter out on a date, and he said to him, have a lovely evening, look after my daughter, and remember this: whatever you do to my daughter tonight, I will do to you when you bring her home. I think that's fantastic. And just how scared must that young man have been? I bet he didn't even kiss her. Anyway, I don't know, you know, if Sean Penn is telling the literal truth, but I just think it's a wonderful little story. And that leads me on to something that it didn't happen to me, but I did hear secondhand from somebody who when you know, just like in Civilian Street, when you go into a new firm or a new company and you've got a new job, you have an interview with a boss. And so it is in the army. When you go to a new unit, your commanding officer sits you down, or your officer commanding, slightly different people. And they interview and they find out a little bit about you, and it's their opportunity to pass on to the new chap what their priorities are and what they expect of them. And these interviews can take anything from sort of 20 minutes to an hour or longer. Depends on the man in charge. Anyway, this chap who was retelling the story said to me that he sat down in this OC's office and the interview took 1 minute, and all he said to him was, remember this, Corporal, I would rather restrain a stallion than kick a donkey. Happy? Off you go. And of course he came out bewildered, but the more he thought about it, I would rather restrain a stallion than kick a donkey. That is profound and tells you everything you need to know about that commanding officer and what he expects of the corporal. It's brilliant. Anyway, quite interesting, I thought. So which are you? The stallion or the donkey? Answers at the comments below. Well, a picture paints 1,000 words, and this is the latest bed that I'm raising. You can see I've dug the soil up there. I've already done that half of the bed and I'm filling with manure, but I dug this out 2 days ago, and you can see it's filled with water, and that water's about 6 inches deep, and it is sitting just below the level of my plot. So basically what I've done is I've not eradicated the water table is there and it's just below the surface. I've lifted myself above it, a bit like one of those Polynesian islands where they build their huts on stilts. So you know, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. I, you know, can only do so much. And as the pictures showed previously, last year this area was completely underwater, and it was for a few months. So it's working. A lot of back-breaking work, and I am struggling with my back at the moment. I'm not usually succumb to that kind of thing, but I'm really struggling. I've got a bit of a strain. Anyway, that's my problem. Digging this lot in doesn't help, does it? Job done. Just made my... Oh, actually, I'm having a cup of coffee this morning. Fancied a change. And while I was making the coffee, it occurred to me, this is supposed to be an allotment channel, although I like to think of it as so much more. And John gave me a tip the other day. We suffer quite badly on this site because we're surrounded by grassland, which the farmer harvests for his cattle, with wireworm. And in fact, most of the damage I've ever had from my potatoes grown in the ground is from the wireworm. And John is very meticulous with his soil. I dig mine over sort of conventionally, but he goes through his absolutely thoroughly, and he quite often discovers a significant number of wireworm. And the wireworm, which love root crops and potatoes particularly, develop into click beetles, and they are particularly a problem when associated with grassland. So, of course, being surrounded by it, you can eradicate them as much as you like, but inevitably they come back because they migrate through the soil. Anyway, he's found a particular way, because of course I've said, you know, they infested my potato crop. What he now does is he takes old potatoes that they haven't eaten and have started to sprout and so on from home. He chops them into pieces, and then he gets a marker. He buries one 6 inches in the ground in his beds, puts a marker on it, and comes back a few days later, takes the piece of potato out, and it's infested with wireworms. And of course he disposes of the wireworms, puts the potato back in, and carries on using it as a trap. It's brilliant. And he's slowly, you know, he's finding less and less. He's been doing this for a number of weeks now, and he's finding less and less wireworm on the potato traps. So, you know, if you suffer from wireworm, it's certainly worth considering. I thought that was quite clever. I hope that's helpful. Now, I planted these all year round collies right at the end of summer, and they were a packet of free seeds with a magazine, and I put them in and thought they're on their own, they can get on with it. And they look absolutely awful, and they're flopping over. Don't know whether that's clubroot. Anyway, I sort of gave a bit of a preliminary weeding to this bed the other day and had a root around, and I hope you can see that in there is a very good sized collie. No blemishes, a good size, and that's going home for tea tonight. I'm absolutely thrilled. Couldn't believe it when I saw it. So I've had a look around, and about 3 or 4 of the others have got similar sized, although slightly smaller, heads of broccoli. So I'm going to chop them out at some point, maybe today. That one's going home for tea tonight, and the rest will get freezed. Absolutely thrilled. Another Sunday, another dinner, another harvest fresh from the plot. So even now, when everything's dormant, I'm still cropping. Fantastic news. Well, I've done something this week that I never thought I'd do. I've written to my MP. Yeah, I'm so angry with what's going on. The lunacy, the self-destruction, the imposition of rules and regulation, etc., etc. And I won't rant. Yeah, I've written to my MP and told him in very plain language that I will never, ever vote for Conservatives again. And I am fully aware that if we'd had a Labour government, it would have been just as bad, probably worse. But I don't care. They will never get my vote again. Mind you, the way we live in such a fascist country now, I'm not sure we'll ever get the vote again. Anyway, I thought I'd let you know that that's how angry I've got. And the first opportunity, there are protests going on now in London, although you wouldn't know it because the mainstream media are deliberately ignoring it. But that'll be the next stage, to go up there and protest, which is currently against the law. Unbelievable. Anyway, one of the things I put in my email is that, you know, this concentration on one virus at the cost of all other health issues, including the mental health issue with people, links me nicely to a bit of niff-naff and trivia. That's why I was doing it. Nothing about a rant. I was trying to be clever, which obviously failed. Anyway, let's talk some niff-naff and trivia. A basket case is a light-hearted, although not entirely affectionate, way of describing somebody who cannot communicate properly, is mentally unstable, unable to cope emotionally. At the end of the First World War, the Surgeon General of the US Army was quoted in the US official bulletin of the 28th of March 1919 that he denies there is any foundation for the stories being circulated of the existence of basket cases in our hospitals. It is a clear reference to trench soldiers suffering shell shock and related mental issues. At the time, basket weaving was a regular activity in both British and American mental hospitals, such as the one at Doolally, that's in India. The phrase was known to be British Army slang during the First World War. Basket cases. Yeah, there you go. And nicely linked in, to suggest someone has gone round the bend is to unkindly infer that they've gone mad. In the 1900s, the Victorians built hospitals in which to confine the mentally unsound. It's a polite way of putting it. The mentally unsound. You're not allowed to say that nowadays, are you? At the time, stately homes were built with long, straight driveways in order that the building could be seen from the main road in all its splendour, albeit from quite a distance. The mental homes were placed at the end of a long, curved driveway so that they would remain unseen, and therefore if a person had gone round the bend, they had been confined. Now that is interesting. Yes, fascinating. I'm a basket case and I've gone round the bend. I have never had any luck overwintering broad beans on my allotment. I've done it, I think, 3 times now, and each time the plants have either been eaten, gone black and withered. Well, I think that's it. Either way, they've not been around for the spring. However, my allotment is turning me into an optimist almost. So I'm going to give it another go. These have been grown in my greenhouse. I brought them up this morning and I'm going to pop them into one of my cold frames, and I'm going to lift the cold frame glass a few inches so that they sort of harden off, because they've been in the greenhouse. I haven't brought them out at all. If I stick them in the ground now, I think they'd suffer a bit of shock. So they're going to go in a cold frame with the door open for a while, maybe a week, and then I'll plant them out in a week's time. So let's hope. So Saturday morning, this video has been filmed over the course of a week. We've had some very nice weather this week actually, but last night we had torrential rain. I heard it in the night, and so the site coming across from my van is flooded. In fact, if you look in the distance, you can see where I park my van, just to give you a sense of, I am diagonally opposite where we park our cars. So I have to walk right the way through the plot, or the site, to reach my 2 plots, and it's absolutely sodden wet, the ground. However, as always, and I keep saying it, I know my plot is dry. So, having a look, while there's no one around, I'll walk you down my allotment. I'm always very conscious of doing this when there's people on the site. I've never quite become at ease talking to a camera when there's people about, so I do tend to do it when people aren't here, which this time of year is not a problem because there's very, very few people up here. So I have some leeks that aren't doing too bad, and there's a strip of daffodils here which I have foolishly planted these leeks over. So I think I'm going to have to take this row out today, which we can then freeze when I prepare them tonight and store, and it will allow the daffodils to come up hopefully. But those 3 beds have got their leaf top dressing on, leaf mulch top dressing. I've raised one of these beds and put some new plastic around the edge to stop the wood from rotting, and my cold frame's around the corner where the broad beans will go. Each week I rake through the soil. I started, that's the bed you saw me starting to raise, and I'm going to wait, I'm going to have some patience, try my best and leave those cabbages, so I'll have to raise the rest of that half of the bed when they're out. These are the leeks that I'm harvesting at the moment, albeit I'm going to take that row out like I said. These are the raspberries that Bridget gave me. I'm hoping that they're summer raspberries, so leaving the canes there now will afford me raspberries next summer. Yeah, as I've said previously, the Brussels sprouts don't look good, but boy do they taste good. And this here I've come to this morning, that is as close as I've got to being underwater so far this year. You can't argue with that. These beds are all dormant. Some of them have been raised. Some of them have got, in fact, 3 along the bottom here. That one, and that one have all had a top dressing of leaf mould, which is quite surprisingly working its way down and starting to disappear, which is good news. Coming past the compost bins with the one I emptied yesterday. A huge pallet from one of my customers here. That's going to take some smashing apart. And here's the bottom with the rhubarb and these beds that I've now raised, and the onions I've put in. Let me think, is it Senshu? Something like Senshu is the white one, and Red Baron is the red one. And coming finally, last but not least, these blackberry bushes that I inherited when I took on this section, and the Hanley bridge over the Hanley Canal, which is my access, because quite often when I bring stuff up the allotment, I'm a bit cheeky and I park briefly in the golf driving range car park, carry my stuff in, and then park my van over there. Somebody's coming up. Oh, they're parking. No? Yeah, don't know who that is. He's turning around. I'm assuming, yeah. That's why I don't know who it is, because he's not staying. So the plot's looking a bit bleak today, but I'm going to go and get a fire on. I'm up here all day. It's Saturday today, we were meant to be going for a walk, but Cheryl said to me, as we were lying in bed, she said, it's all very miserable out there, why don't you go to the allotment? That's her way of getting rid of me for the day. So needless to say, I sprang out of bed like the startled gazelle that I am, and I'm here for the day. I hope John turns up later and we can get together and have a coffee. I've mentioned a few times now how angry I am with this government, and and I don't want to labour the point. You know my point of view, and it has remained consistent right the way from March, and it will remain so until this debacle ever ends, which I think will end, and I think it's been the end game all along, with compulsory vaccinations. Not just this COVID vaccination, but the whole schedule. I think that's what the big pharmaceutical companies are aiming for, and they employ most of the scientists on sage, and that's how that's being fed in. And you can call me a conspiracy theorist if you like, but we shall see how that plays out. But I wanted to mention one point. I watch a lot of stuff by a man called Ivor Cummins, Cummins. He's an Irishman. He's a biotech engineer, I think, and a data analyst. Fascinating man. Absolutely drives holes through the government's policies. For example, he said in the summer, this summer gone, it's a seasonal virus, it's coronavirus, they're all seasonal, so in the summer it all but disappeared, and we introduced masks. He said that single policy of introducing masks was the most unscientific government policy he's seen in his lifetime, and he's got to be about my age. But of course, as I mentioned, Big Pharma. face masks weren't introduced for any scientific reason. They were introduced as a behavioural training tool, because think about your life at the moment. If you take away masks, there is no sign that there's a problem. The only thing that reminds you that there might be a problem is walking around seeing people in face muzzles. Anyway, the point I was going to make was, he said governments have never learned throughout history that they cannot interfere successfully in viruses and diseases. And history tells us this, and he mentioned the plague. And, you know, the plague primarily, not completely, but was a great problem in London, because that's where most of the population at the time were. And the authorities in London thought that they would have to do something to try and control the plague. And what they did is, anybody that got the plague was forced to isolate in their house, which would make sense initially, wouldn't it? But they made the whole family go in. So rather than kill one person, that policy killed whole families in one fell swoop. So that was a good start. And then, so forcing people indoors when there's a virus or a bacteria around is a really bad idea. But we haven't learnt that one, have we? And then the second thing they did is, because they thought the plague was carried by cats and dogs, they had all the cats and dogs in London slaughtered. And of course, the plague was carried by fleas on rats. Once the cats and dogs had been eradicated, that allowed the rats to proliferate, which spread the plague like wildfire. So, I mean, it's terrible. It's tragic that the people were the victims of a government that thought they could interfere and control a disease. You cannot control what you cannot see. Anyway, I thought, you know, with my little penchant for quite interesting, I thought that was interesting. It's important to learn from history. Well, if this afternoon heavy blizzards start and I get snowed in for the next couple of months, I should be okay for warmth. Put in a good couple of hours yesterday of pallet smashing and axing and chopping and slicing and dicing and stacking, and yeah, it's looking good. And of course, one of the byproducts of stacking it here is it dries in double quick time sat next to the stove, as do my gloves, coat and boot. Yeah, even the shed's ahead of schedule. Well, there's a green theme going on there, but another day, another harvest. That's tomorrow's tea sorted. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks to those who've subscribed. I've lost some subscribers and I've gained some subscribers, so it stayed where it is. But well done if you watched it this far. And once again, I shall be back in a fortnight. And we're hoping, because the lockdown finishes next week, we're hoping to get away in the caravan to Exmoor. But we shall see. So I will be back in a fortnight. Look after yourselves, take care, and bye for now.